Living in the Light of Christ's Peace, a conversation toward nuclear disarmament. It's co-hosted by the Association of Pittsburgh Priests and Pax Christi in Pittsburgh. Welcome to all of you that are not in the Pittsburgh area. Our goals for this evening is to pray and to study with one another and hopefully to strategize to make this a living document. So we'll be asking and giving you suggestions for action toward the end of our time together. So let's begin first with prayer. I want to share a prayer that was written by the Marino Office for Global Concerns. The response to each of the prayers is, we cry out for peace. Peaceful God, we come to you from the midst of a broken world where nations raise weapons against nations and mothers and children are the innocent victims of violence. We cry out for peace. Wise God, share your wisdom with the leaders of the world who continue to stockpile dangerous weapons, giving other countries the incentive to do the same, despite their commitment to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We pray for the ability to overcome our brokenness, cooperating instead of competing across borders and boundaries. We cry out for peace. God of comfort, it is hard to believe that our own country has refused to ratify the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, weakening its legitimacy and making our world less safe. We cry out for peace. Tender God, lover of children, it is incomprehensible to us that cluster munitions are still acceptable for use in war, despite the terror they wreak upon unsuspecting children and other civilians during war and for many years afterwards. We cry out for peace. Healing God, so many communities have been left in ruins as a result of the destruction of war. We pray for the healing and rebuilding of communities torn apart by war and violence. We cry out for peace. God, Father and Mother of this world, we pray that you would inspire us to create a peaceful world. Help us call our leaders to accountability and to remind them that more weapons and war do not bring peace. Make us a peaceful people in a peaceful world. So the people of God all say, amen. It is my great honor to introduce to all of you Archbishop John Wester, who is the author and contributor of this pastoral letter. And I have told him last evening that he is truly a prophet in our midst. Archbishop John was ordained in 1976 from San Francisco, born and raised in San Francisco. He was a previous prelate at Salt Lake City, Utah. And he's presently in Santa Fe. So with no further ado, I would like to bring on Archbishop John Wester.
Well, thank you very much, Sister Barbara. You're very kind, and thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be with you. I don't mean to be intruding on your time. I thank Father Bernie. I saw him last week in Baltimore at our Association of U.S. Catholic Priests, and he mentioned that you're having this meeting. I said, oh, I said, I got an email from the Association of Pittsburgh Priests, and I'd like to help out if I could. And so thank you, Father Bernie, for letting me know. And thank you, Pax Christi, in the Pittsburgh Diocese there. And grateful to all of you. And I'm very inspired by all of you and for your commitment to peace and to your commitment to, getting rid of our nuclear weapons throughout the world with the verifiable multilateral disarmament. So I'm just grateful to you, and I'm learning a lot from you and all the different organizations that are out there to really move this cause forward. And I'm especially grateful to Pax Christi and for 50 years now of hard work to bring about peace. So thank you one and all. It's an honor to be with you, and I look forward to being with you for this time. And I know we're going to have questions and answers at the end, so I don't want to say too much now. You have the pastoral letter. I just maybe give a little background to the letter. It might be helpful. And then we'll go on with the program, and then I can, maybe the Q&A at the end, we can do more. But one of the first points I wanted to make was that I really do see God's hand in all of this. You know, it's I was very happy as Bishop of Salt Lake City in Utah. I'd been there a little over 8 years, and so this move came suddenly and unexpectedly. It's just amazing how God works. And I came to Santa Fe, and I like it here very much. It's been 7 years. This month is my 7th year of being here. And but just in my mind, how this whole pastoral letter came about, I really have to believe is providential, that how God works in mysterious ways. And I've never been an avid anti-nuclear proponent. As it says in the letter there, you saw in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis, I do remember being afraid as a child, 12-year-old, looking up to see if those planes had Russian insignia on them, because we lived across the street right by the Pacific Ocean, where they had the Nike missile sites, which today would be like little pop guns in a child's hand compared to the thermonuclear hydrogen bombs we have today. But in any case, we were aware of that, and I can remember being afraid, but really for so long, perhaps like most of us, many of us, kind of lulled into a false sense of complacency, and then with the dismantling of the Soviet Union, and it seemed like things were really, all that was behind us. And now we find ourselves, of course, in another nuclear arms race, really far more dangerous than the first. And we sadly see President Putin rattling his nuclear saber. And we mentioned that in the letter, as you know, there we met, because we put the letter out on January 11th. And sadly, the Ukraine was attacked unjustly on February 24th. So we were afraid that something might happen, of course, as we all were, and that turned out to be the case. So I think this has raised an awareness of the danger we're in as a world. Again, because it's hidden. I mean, I've been here for 7 years, as I say, and in beginning this work now, I've just now discovered that we have over 2,000, closer to 2,500 nuclear warheads just a mile and a half south of the airport in Albuquerque, probably the largest single place where they have the most concentration of nuclear warheads. And I did not know that. And so it's just amazing, all this is going on, and we just go about our business. I recently received I guess you'd call it a kind of a protest letter that I shouldn't be in this business of championing nuclear disarmament. I should be spending more time on abortion. And but I made the case to the correspondent that, number one, the church is pro-life in a variety of ways. We have to be pro-life in all aspects, but I won't get into it. But he was making different arguments. I said, really, I see this cause of multilateral, verifiable nuclear disarmament as very much of a pro-life cause, because if worse came to worse, it would obliterate the entire human race and the entire planet. So this truly is a pro-life issue. It's one that we should be very concerned about. And again, it's not easy because it's such a seemingly intractable problem. But I think, so for me, at the beginning of the letter, it was important to point out the personal level of that. My collaborators and my team that I had working with me on writing the letter, I was going to kind of leave that out or kind of not say too much about it, but they insisted that I put that in because it puts more of a human face on it, and I think it touches human hearts, and maybe is one of many stories of the fear that nuclear weapons gives all of us throughout the world. And as I say in the letter, I did go to Japan with the Cardinal Aveda and Bishop Blair in 2017, and when we went to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I found it a very sobering experience, and all three of us were very saddened, and it put a pall over our vacation for those days when we were there, looking at the museums and the pictures and the evidence that's still there physically, the Iboku Dome and all in Hiroshima. It was just the terrible destruction that came about, and the human suffering and the human death that came about from those explosions. And then, of course, coming back here to Santa Fe, I was going to the museum, and friends and family, and part of the museum had the whole Los Alamos project, the Manhattan Project, and the cathedral, our beautiful cathedral, is just really around the block from the office where Oppenheimer and others checked in 1942 and began their work on the creation and manufacture and delivery of the first atomic bombs ever made, and the first ones used, of course, and so far the only ones used in war. So the juxtaposition of those two things, our visit to Japan, being the Archbishop of Santa Fe, I felt it was really important to say something. And so that was just kind of percolating in me. And then I gave a talk at our roundhouse, our state house, on nuclear disarmament. And I met Jay Coughlin, who is the executive director of Nuke Watch New Mexico. And he laughs. We've become good friends. But at the time, I said to myself, oh boy, this is one of those radicals, and he's going to suck me into this, giving protests and doing this and that. And I'm going to have to be careful. What am I going to do? And I reminded him of that. And he said, well, you were right. I am a radical. And he said, and we're going to turn you into one eventually too. So we'll see how that goes. But in any case, he's a wonderful human being, a great, genuine, authentic person who's been working for peace and nuclear disarmament for decades. And so Father John Deere, my own staff here, Ann Avalon and Leslie Radigan, we worked hard on the content and the pictures, the layout, the whole shebang. But to us, it was really important to have that personal touch. And one of the things that really strikes me in our work together is, T.S. Eliot's famous quote from his poem, that the communication of the dead is tongued with fire beyond the language of the living. And I felt that a lot of our work for nuclear disarmament is really giving voice to those Japanese people who were killed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The language of the dead is tongued with fire beyond the language of the living. I think they're speaking to us still. And of course, in our Catholic faith, we have a strong belief, obviously, in the communion of saints. And I think that it's really important for us to listen to what they would be saying to us. And I know we get into debates, should the United States have dropped those bombs or not? Should we have them or not? All these different, sides of the conversation, of the debate. But I think that that's one thing to listen to, the horrific human suffering, what we had created in the atomic bomb and now the hydrogen bomb. I think that we really need to look carefully and listen to them. So that was, I think, an important part of the pastoral letter. That, I think it was G.K. Chesterton said that it's those of us who are living are arrogant. We think that we have something over those who are dead. And he said, that's not true. I have to get my hands on that quote because it was a very good quote, that we have to listen to those who've gone before us and those who suffered so terribly in 1945. In that light, there's a lot of the letter that does speak about the gospel as a gospel of nonviolence. And of course, Father John Deere has done a lot of good work in this regard in his center, Beatitude Center, and looking at, this whole idea of the gospel of peace. I found an interesting quote. It's in on the website there of Nuke Watch New Mexico. And interestingly, this is not a quote from our Lord or from a saint. It's a quote from General Omar Bradley. And he said, ours is a world of nuclear giants and ethical infants. We know more about war than we know about peace, more about killing than we know about living. We have grasped the mystery of the atom and rejected the Sermon on the Mount. I think that's a very telling quote. And I think that really animates a lot of our work. And I'm sure the Association of Pittsburgh Priests and the Pax Christi and so many other groups, ICANN and Plowshares, et cetera, that, we really need to take seriously the Sermon on the Mount and the gospel that Jesus Christ proclaimed of nonviolence. When the disciples wanted to call down fire from heaven on the Samaritans for not receiving them, Jesus was adamant. He was strong. And when he talked in the Garden of Gethsemane, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. Put away your sword. It's clear that the gospel is a gospel of nonviolence. I think throughout the ages and the centuries, there's a tendency, I think, in human nature to be pugnacious, and we tend to water down the gospel of nonviolence. And so I think that that's another important conversation that we have to have in this work of nuclear disarmament, of really realizing what it means that we have proclaim a gospel of nonviolence. The nuclear weapons that our world has now, with Russia, having about over 6,000 warheads, we 5,500 or so. The Chinese far less, but they're growing. Not to mention other nations that have them or beginning to have them. It really creates a clear and present danger to our entire planet, to the entire human race. I'm in the middle of reading Dan Ellsberg's book, Right Now, and the Doomsday Machine. And unfortunately, the only time you sometimes get to read is right before going to bed. It doesn't make for pleasant bedtime reading. It's going to have nightmares. But it really is amazing. I'm learning so much about the power of these weapons is just staggering, absolutely staggering. And one part of the book he's talking about when he was working in the 70s there, doing auditing with Rand Corporation, and he had pretty much clear access to talk to anybody and all the top secret clearance and above that. But even these few planes he saw in one area, just one of those planes had the firepower of all the bombs the Allies dropped in World War II. I mean, it's just a staggering power that these bombs have, and how we have so many of them. And of course, the damage that would be done not just by the immediate explosion of these bombs and the millions of people that would be killed instantly, millions more would be killed in the aftermath and the radiation, and then the fires that would start. There would be just the whole planet would catch on fire. Anything combustible would be catching on fire, and all of this radiation and ashes and the stratosphere would stay there for a decade at least. The scientists would predict, which means there'd be an end to all vegetation, any life that depends on photosynthesis, any life that depends on eating and for survival. All life would just be wiped out eventually. So it's just a horrific scene that we've created for ourselves, and we have to get ourselves out of it. And I think the gospel of peace, mandates that we work hard on this, even though it's hard to sometimes keep people's attention because they believe that everything is just fine and that we're safe. And of course, the reality is that we're not. One of the big points of the letter was that Pope Francis has really changed the equation here. He's moved the moral needle. Really, if you go back to the recent popes in the modern age, all of them have been very much against nuclear weapons and for nuclear disarmament. The Vatican has been one of the first signatories on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. If not, I think it's actually the first. The Vatican has been very strong on this over this decades. As you remember, the 1983 Bishop's Pastoral, a peace pastoral, was an excellent pastoral. It was one that was quite significant and had quite an impact on our country and beyond. But even in that pastoral, they did provide for deterrence. They said, well, it would be okay for a country to have nuclear weapons as a deterrence. But now Pope Francis has said that that is not the case, that even possessing nuclear weapons is immoral. So that's quite a statement, and that's really an important statement that our beloved Pope Francis has given us. And so I think that's something we need to pay close attention to. The letter also makes a point that even that narrative of deterrence is a false one, because that never has really been the United States or Russia's goal. If we were to have nuclear weapons for deterrence, we would not need, the thousands and thousands that we have now. 100 or so, is all you would need for deterrence. And clearly, we know now through documents that are known to us that never was our intention anyway. We always had provisions for first strike capability and provisions for striking at Russia and China, even though China may not have been part of the initial aggression. Our plans called for the complete full-scale first strike attack on Russia and China, which would have killed millions and millions of people had it ever been executed. So I think that, we have to really look carefully at this. What is it? We have to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves, Scripture tells us. We have to be look carefully at the situation that we've created, because if we're not successful, then it'll be too late. Once those buttons get pushed, it'll be too late. There'll be no more effort. Won't be necessary. It'll be the end of our planet as we know it. And so I think that this is really something that indicates how hard we have to be in working on these issues, and that we just can't let them slide. There's an urgency, in other words, to our message that we have to look at. I think and then of course one of the main thrusts of the letter, and I'll just end with that, I don't want to go any longer, is communication and conversation and community, communio, that we have to be together. That's why I'm so heartened by learning about the Pittsburgh Association of Priests and the Pax Christi in Pittsburgh and the International Pax Christi International, our own USA Pax Christi. It's so heartening to hear about this, because we have to talk about it. And the main point of the letter is, let's talk about, let's converse, let's rejuvenate, sustain, and prolong a conversation about this important issue. I welcome the fact that I'm in Santa Fe, and there are many here who disagree with this letter. And I'm hoping to have conversations with Catholic scientists in Los Alamos and Sandia Labs and maybe in Lawrence Livermore in California. But the important thing to see here is that we have to talk about it. We just can't be silent about it. And so I think that if someone says to me, "Oh, I really disagree with your letter," I say, "Oh, wonderful, let's talk about it." And they say, "Aren't you mad?" Because no, I want to hear maybe I need to learn. Why do you disagree? Maybe I'm missing something. Let's talk about it. I'll listen to you, you listen to me. Let's see if we can move forward. And I have had Catholic scientists, one of whom is our deacon here in the Archdiocese, tell me that he works at the lab and that he agrees with the letter. He says we do need to work for nuclear disarmament. And he believes the only reason I'm in this work right now is that I believe that we can't have unilateral disarmament, but it's my goal and my hope and my prayer that one day we will. And I think that we need to continue for the time being, but we need to keep talking about this. So that encourages me as well. So in the back of the letter there are action items, and Sister Barbara mentioned that we're going to talk about that, or you're going to talk about it at the end of your meeting. So let me just stop there. It's 5:30 my time, and then I'll be around for a little bit, and I have to leave for a moment. Then I'll be back for a lot of your time, and then I'll be here for the Q&A as well at the end. So thank you very much, and God bless you, and thank you so much for your important work in this really critical endeavor. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Archbishop John. I appreciate everything you've said. Now I'm going to invite Michael Drohan. He is a member of our Association of Pittsburgh Priests, and he's going to give us insights of why this should matter to us. Michael?
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Archbishop Wester. The task I have been given is to say some words about why we should care now about the abolition of nuclear weapons. That was the task I was given. However, before I get to that, I want to say a few words about our special guest tonight, Most Reverend John Wester, Archbishop of Santa Fe, whom we have just heard, and I hope, Archbishop, you are still here with us. When I first heard of your pastoral letter entitled A Conversion Towards Nuclear Disarmament, on or about January the 11th of this year, 2022, my heart took several leaps of joy at the good news letter. I read it immediately with joy and exaltation that I have not felt in ages. Since 1983, when the bishops of the US released their peace pastoral, we have hardly heard a murmur about your fellow bishops, apart from isolated individuals such as Archbishop Tom Gumbleton and Archbishop Hunthausen. And I think your pastoral has brought hope and encouragement to many people involved in the struggle to abolish nuclear weapons. And let us hope it ushers in a new day of activism to abolish these weapons of mass destruction. So a big thank you to you for taking this important and courageous action and for being with us here tonight. It is a great privilege for us, for you to be with us and for us to hear you in person. Now to the question I have been given. The first reason why we should care now is that the global situation in regard to nuclear weapons has become more dangerous and precarious over the past few years, especially under the Trump presidency. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists has placed the doomsday clock at 100 seconds to midnight. Ethan, could you put up the first slide here as I talk about this? There you see it. A midnight signifying the arrival of nuclear Armageddon, which would mean the destruction of life on planet Earth as we know it, and bring about nuclear winter and the death of most of humanity and other forms of life. It is an absolutely incredible scenario. The two most critical threats to the survival of humanity and the planet are estimated to be climate change and nuclear weapons. But you would scarcely realize this from the news cycle. It is like news from nowhere. But we have to make it the news, the most important threat to humanity and the planet. There are many factors that have led us to this dreadful moment, and I can only touch on a few of them. So first, to the most immediate one, which is the war in Ukraine. And here, Ethan, if you would put up the second slide here. There are many things that are devastating about this war of aggression on the part of the Russian Federation. But the most frightening is the possibility of the war escalating into a nuclear conflagration. Certain statements of President Vladimir Putin intimate this scenario, and the deepening of US and NATO involvement by pouring weapons and support into Ukraine, as well as the imposition of ever more sanctions, heightens the risk. Apart from Pope Francis and the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, diplomacy is hardly mentioned in the present discourse about the war. Worse still, our press, our Congress, our church, and all our institutions are silent. And we could almost say cheerleaders in the demonization of Putin and the heaping on of sanctions and arms without end. Money is no problem, it seems. The playbook seems to be to antagonize and also isolate President Putin, leading him to more desperate and unthinkable options. Take the statement of Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin a few months ago in Kiev, when he said, and I quote, "We want to see Russia weakened to the extent," and he goes on. Just this past week, a congressional committee entitled the US Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe, or the Helsinki Commission, met and recommended the breaking up of the Russian Federation into many separate and independent republics. And they put this forward as the decolonization, if you don't mind, of the Russian Federation. These are all extremely dangerous and provocative statements which seem bound to provoke Russia into more desperate actions. And I believe that this is where we should start and concentrate our efforts at this moment, demanding that all sides sit down at the negotiation table to bring this horrid war to an end, or it could bring us to an end. I think that this war and what is going on is intimately related with nuclear weapons and the imperative of their abolition now. A third reason why we should care and act now is that despite the dreadful situation, which is the Ukraine war, the United Nations has given us an instrument to work with through the passage of the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Ethan, if you could bring up slide number 3 here. You can see there on the slide what the TPNW is about, the Treaty for the Prohibition of the Nuclear Weapons. This treaty was passed by the UN in 2017 in its session in New York City, which I was able to attend, and which pushed through popular pressure to the passage of through the General Assembly. And the treaty was finally ratified in 2020 and went into effect on January 22nd, 2021, last year. All signatories to the treaty called 68 called state parties, which now amount to 65 countries. They undertake not to manufacture or possess nuclear weapons or have them installed in their territories. To date, none of the states possessing nuclear weapons have become a state party to the treaty, including the US. This treaty gives us an opportunity to demand from our government that it become a state party, and we must work on all our so-called representatives to deliver on bringing this to Congress. Ethan, could you bring up slide 4 here, please? This slide is from The World Beyond War, and it shows us, if we go to this site, and Ethan is going to leave this again in the chat room, where we can sign on and ask our Congress people to sign on to this, which asks us to tell our Congress members to publicly support joining the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and to co-sponsor the Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Economic Energy Conversion Act. So as long as the US and other nuclear states turn their noses up at the TPNW, we will remain in mortal terror of a nuclear Armageddon. And here is a very concrete way in which we can push the issue and just not talk about how terrible it is and how awful it is, etc., etc., but we can really get to work. In regard to nuclear weapons, and I conclude with this reflection, a strange phenomenon has developed. which is that one can scarcely mention them in polite company, as Archbishop Wester has more or less intimated in his remarks. The press is by and large mute on them, as is the Church and Congress. When did you last hear about any of the danger, the constant danger under which we live? For the latter, namely Congress, no amount of money is enough to pour into the Pentagon and into its nefarious weapons and its 5,500 counting nuclear weapons. And so the general populace, which means us, is lulled into a kind of mental slumber whereby we banish the very thought of these awful instruments of death as dirty thoughts. And we live in a make-believe world in which they do not exist. Essentially, we are sleepwalking or made to sleepwalk towards the precipice of nuclear Armageddon. It is my fervent hope that this pastoral letter will be a shot in the arm to all of us to wake up from our psychic numbing and let our pastors, our Congress people, our president, and whoever know that we are not going to take it anymore. We have to abolish nuclear weapons now and as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, very much. We now, I'd like to introduce Reverend Paul Dordahl. Paul is actively involved in the Association of Pittsburgh Priests and Pax Christi, but even more importantly, he is our leader for Stop Banking the Bomb, which you'll learn that this is one of the actions that all of us could participate in. So, Paul.
Thank you, Sister Barbara, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to share my screen here so I can share some really important information with you. I want to thank Archbishop Wester for being with us. It is indeed a treat, something that we didn't know what was going to happen until a few days ago. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. I also want to say that I learned so much from reading the pastoral letter. And I felt energized and rejuvenated, which is a word that Archbishop Wester uses. And I love that word because we need to be rejuvenated and have that youthful energy brought back into our movement. I also appreciated learning about some words of Pope Benedict, which really got me to reflect, and I'll be reflecting for quite some time on them. And that is that idea of the fundamental right to peace that human beings have, and how that really does, energize me as a veteran, the United States Army veteran, a combat veteran in the Iraq War, and a member of Veterans for Peace, and also of our Catholic groups here in Pittsburgh. And so years ago, about 5 years ago coming on, we had a large march here in Pittsburgh, and it took a lot of effort. It took so much energy for us to put on a single march. A few of us in the peace movement here in Pittsburgh had a conversation, said we need to have a much more sustainable effort that doesn't require so much energy to put on just one single event that will really impact our entire city and maybe even beyond. And at the time, the Don't Bank on the Bomb report had just come out. And one of the members of our group brought it out, and we were beginning to talk about Molly Rush and the incredible anti-nuclear history and legacy that Pittsburgh has, and how we might continue it on here in the 21st century. And so that's how we came up with the PNC Stop Banking the Bomb campaign. We recognize that PNC, once known as the Pittsburgh National Corporation, no longer stands for that. It's just an ambiguous term, but it is the Pittsburgh Bank. It is the bank that started in Pittsburgh and is now the fifth largest bank in the country. They are involved in supporting nuclear weapons manufacturers. And we tried to meet with them. We tried to have lots of dialogue with them, and we continue to try to have dialogue. We're very grateful for the investors advocates for social justice for being a liaison with us, with PNC. But we believe that to work on nuclear abolition not only requires a time to work with national politicians or international, but we've got to bring it to the grassroots level, to the people in the streets, the people who walk by all of our pickets and say, I didn't know that my contributions and my not donations, but their deposits go towards the building of these things. So not only our tax dollars, but our deposits are being used to construct what I call weapons of mass extinction. Back in November of 2017, we had our first demonstration at PNC Tower. And since then, we've had over 125 demonstrations. They happen every other week at various PNC banks all around the Pittsburgh area. They've happened in Philadelphia, New York, DC, West Virginia, and Ohio. And we are a very, very active group, about 100 or so folks here in Pittsburgh. And we've done other things as well. One of the, I'll show you a chart a little bit later, how we're structured, so you get an idea. For those of you who might be inspired by Bishop Wester's wonderful pastoral letter and the work that we're doing here in Pittsburgh, I do want to, let's see if I can advance this here. Technology. Let's see here. How's that? There we go. There we go. So we put a little F in the middle of the military-industrial complex. We call it the military-financial-industrial complex because it really is all tied together. When the Russia-Ukraine conflict began, all of the weapons manufacturers saw a huge increase in profits. And they looked at the 21st century as a great century for the profits of the defense industry. And so we look to PNC Bank, and all of these national banks, they seem like they do great things and they do a lot of charitable work. But we're also aware that they are investing in all sorts of things that are just not helpful for people and not certainly for peace. Since William Demchak took over PNC in 2013, the profits of PNC have almost doubled. Their stock value went from $94 in March of 2020 all the way up to $200 just at the end of the year. William Demchak is a Catholic, and we would like to meet with him personally and talk to him about Bishop Wester's pastoral letter. And we're going to continue to try to meet with Mr. Demchak. And we are very interested in continuing to look at the possibility of getting more people to divest themselves of their investments in PNC Bank. Part of Bishop Wester's pastoral letter was to tell those who had investments not to invest in nuclear weapons. On page 42 of the pastoral letter, it says, if you have investments, please use your money consciously. Do not invest in nuclear weapons. And I think that is such an important thing that is so tangible that can be done individually, that can have a great impact. And I'll give you one anecdote. We have a gentleman on our campaign. He called up his investors who are a social justice minded investment firm. I won't mention their name, but he asked his stockbroker if they knew that PNC was invested in nuclear weapons, and they said they did not. At the next annual meeting, that group, which owned millions of shares, voted with us. One phone call by one person to his stockbroker at a socially minded investment firm was able to tell PNC in a very, very important way that we are not going to stand by either. So shareholder advocacy is a big part of what we do, as well as the direct actions on the streets, and also local politics as well. And so our leadership team is made up of about 15 people. I always say this at these seminars that we do. This does not take a huge group of people. This takes a small group of committed people. I kind of joke around with some of the other groups in Boston and other places I presented. I said, you need a few nuns. If you don't have a lot of energy on your team, find yourself a few nuns. They are really very passionate. And of course, we have priests as well. And Father Bernie is an inspiration to me as well. But this is how we divvy up our work. We have a direct action team, a shareholder team, an education team, and a council resolution team, where we've had several resolutions put before City Council, and we are very excited about that work. Here's some pictures to show the real life work that we do. And this was the TPNW entrance into effect protest at PNC Tower, where we were joined by many other activists in the freezing cold. Every 2 weeks, rain or shine, we're out there. And at the Hiroshima Day 76th anniversary, Molly Rush spoke at that event. And we had a die out. We had some of our members wearing what looked like hazmat suits and putting chalk outlines around those who died because of PNC's investments in nuclear weapons. And so one of the lines from Bishop Wester's pastoral letter really hit me as well. The time has come to transfer the massive funds spent on the preparation for nuclear war to end poverty and hunger. How important it is when we say we don't have any money to pay for this or pay for that, yet we always have billions and trillions to pay for weapons of mass extinction. And finally, I want to say to you, if you have not signed our petition, both of these were started by Father Bernie Serville. I know he's 20 years my senior, and if I have half his energy when I'm his age, I'll be a lucky man. But a better PNC Bank, bnk.org, to sign on to tell PNC Bank that we are. And there are hundreds and hundreds of people, national and international figures have signed on to that. And most recently, Father Bernie has started the No Nukes Wester Speaks for Us. And I certainly can agree with that. Archbishop Wester speaks for all of us. Thank you so much. I hope I came in under my time. I'm originally from New York, so I know how to speak fast.
The whole thing is that, as Paul Dordahl has said, you need these actions that continue and that inspire people and bring them to see that there's a possibility of hope. Because I think part of the problem is certain despair comes into people's feelings when they hear about nuclear weapons. And so my way of looking at things is hope is a decision. And if you act on that decision, you can maintain and build on that hope. So it's a matter of not just thinking about it and not just, praying for it. That's very important, but also, finding ways. And there are many, many ways people can get involved. So, having this pastoral come out is very timely because Michael mentioned the UN Treaty on the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons. And I've not read one word about it anywhere other than, in peace documents and publications. So my sense is that it's time that, we do what we can to celebrate this pastoral and to make sure that it is widely distributed and widely talked about. I think it's good to do a Zoom event when it's only possible to do that, but it will be wonderful, I hope, in the future when we can actually have, direct interchange and have an audience to be inspired by some of this. So I'm hoping that that all of that happens. In my own life, I could not have ever thought of doing such an action. except for two things: the inspiration of Daniel and Philip Berrigan, who in 1966 went into a draft board office, brought out draft files, and burned them with napalm as a protest against the Vietnam War. And then ever since then, they kept up a continual effort in very, very different ways. And so when I heard about this event from a friend who was also a member of the Plowshares, I went to a retreat, not quite knowing what I'd be getting into. And I think the thing about nuclear weapons is it's interesting. You know, when we went in to hammer on Mark 12A warhead, the cones, nose cones where the weapons go in, they were not much bigger than these highway cones that, you know, those little red things that go in on the street when, you know, slow down traffic. And, you know, you have an imagination of these big, huge, you know, impossible weapons. And yet these are incredibly, you know, ordinary looking. So somehow I'd just be very thankful, and I am thankful for this event and for the Bishop's Pastoral. And I think how we need to follow through is to do everything possible with the energy of Paul Dordal and more of us to really reach out and to talk to people. The threat and the fact that Putin has put his nuclear weapons on high alert should be the topic that should, you know, get people really thinking and moving. So, you know, I'm interested in other people's ideas. If there's time, that would be very useful, I think.
Thank you, Molly. Appreciate it so much. Now I'd like to introduce a friend of mine, Marlene Millick, who's just going to give us a sampling of what it's like to try to advocate in a parish and to try to bring this about in a parish. So Marlene?
Thank you. Before I do that, I would like to indulge myself with a little bit of history. From my depth, I can see a nuclear warhead that is now defunct, but it's there and it's still very, very visible. And you also need to know that somewhere in history, in our locality in Canonsburg, I remember I was a child and Madame Curie was coming to town because there was a uranium refinery that she was going to be visiting in Canonsburg. So we have a little bit of history in the nuclear world. Now to how to influence people. Boy, that's a tough one. I think Molly hit on something that is very important, and that is one-on-ones. My major experience is when I was active in PIN, and that is the Pittsburgh/Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network. And it was an ecumenical group of activists. Now, within my parish, we had a large social justice group, but trying to get any of them to be active was a real challenge. Catholics seemed to be amenable to giving their money and thinking that should take care of it. We're relying on Catholic Charities and St. Vincent de Paul to feed the poor. But they need to know that you need to go underneath to the foundations to change the foundational thinking, that you cannot change the surface until you change the foundation. And that is hard. I went online just to see what they had to say about what does the Bible say about taking action. I came up with 100 verses that talk about that. James says, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. So I think it's a hard struggle, and not everyone is, not everyone's personality leads to activism. Every Catholic has somewhere deep in their soul their social justice principles, but getting them to act on that is a challenge. So the only hope that I have is that maybe we can do a one-on-one, talk to people, tell them what's going on, invite them to the event, explain what's going on, and go outside your comfort zone, go into the ecumenical world, because my experience in Penn was that the Unitarians were just social justice activists on everything, and I was always envious of them. Maybe a lot of them are ex-Catholics. I don't know that, but that may be the case. But anyhow, just to remind your fellow members, your friends, your family, what the dangers are and why we need to be alert and continue our activism. I don't have the answer, but each one of us has the responsibility to spread the word.
Thank you, Marlene, very much.
Brother Bernie has his hand up, sister.
Hey,
Yes,
Bernie.
yeah. Archbishop, I asked you the same question down in Baltimore last week. What kind of solidarity are you getting from your fellow bishops?
That would be my question too.
I haven't gotten a whole lot of response from my brother bishops. It's not, I don't interpret that they were against it or anything. I think several have told me, like in San Diego, they said that you know, they were pleased with it. They liked it very much. They agreed with it and thanked me for it. So I did get that, but again, from very few. So you know, when we get together, there's a lot going on, a lot of items and all. So this is not foremost, I guess, in their minds. But I got a few emails from bishops saying, you know, thank you for your pastoral. But it's been, I've gotten a much bigger response from Pax Christi and Plowshares and back from the Brink and some of those groups. I can, so, and again, I'm not, you know, I tend to be an optimist. I'm not interpreting that as a negative thing. I don't know that. I'd like to think that all the bishops would be for denuclearization, but I don't know. So that's what it is.
Archbishop, what is your thoughts about what do we need to put in place if people would give up their jobs in like Los Alamos and other places? What can we do for those people?
Thus far, there have been people who have left their jobs because of the nuclear issue and the belief that we shouldn't be in it. The number one, we did address in the letter because that is a critical issue for us here in New Mexico, and I realize that many of our people, many of our parishioners, that gain their living by being scientists, engineers, and their, you know, ancillary work at the labs. So mainly, if we could get traction on this and begin now, if we can get our government to put money into peacemaking instead of war making, we need to do a lot of work on verifying that the signatories have indeed worked toward elimination of their nuclear armaments. So you know, President Reagan's saying trust but verify. So we have to have a world community where we can, you know, and to trust each other more, but also have an ability to really verify. So that would be a lot of jobs there. And these labs are already doing that. You know, in the COVID-19, they've done a lot of computer what do you call it, looking at possibilities and how the projections and all this and the virus. So they're already doing that already to a degree, and there's such things. And so I think we need to just make that conversion, that important conversion. But that's not going to happen until we get everybody to sign on to an agreement to have an eventual reduction and elimination of nuclear weapons. And then the other, I guess just to invite people as best they can to convert their knowledge into other companies, other manufacturers and R&R companies that would have more peaceful use of their technology or their scientific background, et cetera.
Speak for
I
yourself.
was thinking, I was thinking about Dorothy Day. Back in the 40s, when she was a pacifist, refused to even go into a bomb shelter when they had the air raids in New York or wherever. And now we're saying, maybe we'll make her a saint. How many people do you think walked with her or were in that same attitude that she was? And proportionately speaking, I would think about as many people now would be ready to say, yeah, let's get rid of our nuclear weapons as with walking with her when she was a pacifist during the Second World War. I think we're still in pretty much the same attitude, the same spirit as we were then as a country.
Yeah, she was alone.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it takes people like that, to leadership like that. Brave is very courageous, and that is an important question, I think, in terms of how far that whole idea of the gospel of peace, the gospel of nonviolence. There are people, that we're seeking to canonize. The Association of U.S. Catholic Priests is working on that, and that kind of action, I think, to honor people who have been conscientious objectors and who refuse to kill. It's a personal decision, obviously, how far you would take that. If you could save your life, if you had an intruder in your home and you had an ability to save your life by killing the intruder, would you let the intruder kill you, or would you kill the intruder? I think most people, if they had the chance, would say, well, I have a right, and the church teaches that you do have a right to self-defense. Some people would take it so far as to say, no, I would rather be killed than to take another life. So, but I think that's the minority, as my sense. And I think, as I say, in terms of this conversation and moving forward, I think that, our position has been verifiable multilateral authorization. I think that's going to get more people to agree with that. But I do think we need the Father Louis Vitalis, the Franciscan in San Francisco, and those who have been the Berrigan brothers, and those who have been prophetic. We need that too. So I think we need all of us together, some prophetic, some more maybe would use the word practical, or try to gain a consensus with everybody, but whatever it is, we have to try all avenues, I think.
Thanks, Bishop.
Archbishop, has there been much progress made in your diocese since the release of the letter right there in your own diocese?
That's a very good question. It's an interesting question. For one thing, we're just coming out of bankruptcy. We just settled the bankruptcy a few months ago, and now we're gathering the funding. And so we're kind of we're in a unique position. As a matter of fact, before publishing the letter, I guess it's typical. I was starting to have second thoughts, and maybe I should delay this, or maybe this should be put off a bit because of the bankruptcy. I didn't want to confuse all the issues, but I felt this was such an important issue, and it was so important for Santa Fe to take a stand on this, because otherwise, saying nothing is saying something. If the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, where these bombs are being developed so much, there's more plutonium here in New Mexico probably than any other state, and pro rata, there's more PhDs in New Mexico than any other state. We had to say something, I think, to take a stand and to take an important place at the table. So anyway, we decided to go through with the publication of the letter, and I'm glad I did. The reaction here has been similar to the bishops. It's interesting. I don't know. I'm kind of, to be honest, I'll be very frank with you. I'm very new at this, and I'm not, this is something that I didn't learn about in the seminary, and I'm learning. I'm on a quick learning curve. I'm doing my best, and but I think that I presented it to the priest council. They didn't say hardly anything at all. I think a lot of them are thinking, this is going to be a very controversial subject with the parishioners. It's not going to be easy with the parishioners. So our plan here in the Archdiocese is that right now we're just trying to get the word out. We're trying to, let that sit, kind of planting seeds. And I'm so grateful to Pax Christi and groups like the Pittsburgh Association of Pittsburgh Priests and other groups that are promoting the letter. And then once March 31st passes, that with grace, God's grace, then we'll be truly beyond the bankruptcy. Then the next stage is I'm going to invite, our own Archdiocesan Peace and Justice Commission, which we're working on right now to beef up, and then to start programs and offer parish Peace and Justice Commissions to start working on this as a real important cause for our Archdiocese, for this local church. And that's when I think I might get a little bit more pushback because, and again, this is just my own thought, but I think some areas, some folks are thinking, well, if we just ignore Wester and ignore the pastoral, it'll go away. So, and I think that's, a hope of some, and they think that's the best strategy. So that's why we continue to meet once a week with my team, and we'll be meeting again tomorrow at 4. We'll take a little break in July and then back again at the end of July. But so we keep talking about how to go forward. We're having I'll be on Father John Deere's July 2nd on his Beatitude Center Zoom as his guest to talk about it. I've been on an ICANN. I've been on we had a talk with Ira Helfand, Dr. Ira Helfand, who's really quite an incredible person. I really enjoyed meeting him. And he's been a huge hero and proponent of this cause for many years. So I keep trying to do I keep taking these things on. And I didn't realize writing the letter that was not the end of our work. It was just the very beginning. As I've created more work for myself than I can. I'm just so behind and everything. But I give it over to the Lord at night. I say, well, tomorrow's another day. I'll try again. But so anyway, in essence, it's been very muted here. I have some priest friends of mine here in the Archdiocese who I would say cordially disagree with me in the letter, and they don't think that it's a realistic one. So one of them works very close to me, and I say, well, okay, fine. I want to hear what you have to say, So, matter of fact, he publishes a little newsletter. And the day I gave my talk that started this whole thing going, he came out with his article, which pretty much contradicted what I had to say. So, so I immediately suspended him for a month. No, I didn't. But anyway, but again, I encourage that because I really have a strong conviction that our cause is just and it's right, and that our Lord's behind us, God gave us the ability to create nuclear arms, but he also gave us a soul and a will and a conscience to make decisions that are for peace and not war. And so that's where our free will comes in. So I really believe that this whole thing has been very providential. To be honest with you, I'm really, my classmates in the seminary, I'd be the last person you would think would be doing it. I think that may be why some of the bishops are so quiet. They can't believe that Wester's doing this. They go, what's going on here, but so that's what the grace of God will do. And so we'll see, but so the short answer to your question, the response has been pretty quiet, definitely not enthusiastic response, and kind of a muted one, I'd say.
Archbishop, I think you shouldn't be so pessimistic. As I said in my words, when I heard of your pastoral, when I read it, I mean, I was so taken, I was so so overjoyed and blown away by it that I immediately took to it. But I think I'm not alone. I think that there are millions across the country who are tremendously taken by your pastoral, and so it's too early yet to estimate the effects of that. So I wouldn't underestimate what kind of a seed this has sown in the country to waken people up from this, what I call the slumber of kind of recognizing the enormity of the danger under which we live.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate that. And your words when you gave your talk earlier were very encouraging to me. I felt very encouraged by what you had to say, and I appreciate that. And I do believe you're right. The Oscar Romero prayer, I think, I don't have any, my hope is to plant seeds, to kind of do the work as the Lord calls me and all of us to do. I have gotten a lot of mail, I'll say that, from all across the country, from people who have been very pleased with it. And so that's been very positive, email and regular mail. The Vatican, we sent it to the Pope, we sent it to the Cardinal Czerny, and to others. And I'm going to be going over to Rome in August from my dear friend Bishop McElroy, the Cardinal Designate McElroy, and he and I went to the same grammar school. We've been, friends all our lives. But he, so when I'm over there, I'm going to see if I can't talk to some of the. August, of course, they leave Rome and go to the beach, But hopefully, I could see some people there and work there. And we also sent it to President Biden, and we had a kind of a back door to him, and then we sent it through the front door. So, we are trying to we send it to our state legislators here in New Mexico. I have not heard from them. I don't think it's going to be something that.
Ed Clunin?
Unmute yourself, Ed.
Okay. Archbishop, I look at your exercise as something different for the Universal Church. Here we are, sort of in the cradle of militarism. We spend as much money, everybody on this phone call knows, as the next 6 countries on defense. We have constant war. Pope Francis has been a sort of a light to the world, and the opposition that has come to him is from what I would say is within the church, from the United States and Western Europe. And you're standing up for this sort of is a beacon that many of us that are, as I said in our small group, involved in our little Stop Banking the Bomb here in our own way, every 100 times plus, is a reflection on that. And it is sometimes lonely to be an activist or to be a person of faith when the people don't seem that interested. Well, we do need leadership. And this letter, I think, will spark in a lot of us a renewed interest in doing more to what we believe, no matter what our age. And as I said in our group, the other hope is in our Stop Banking the Bomb group, we have anywhere from 20 to 30 people on every other week before a bank. And 15 of us are old timers, like most of the people on this call, but the other 15 are interesting. They're from the Green Party and the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And their anti-war activities in both of those organizations are centered on our campaign to stop banks and from funding nuclear weapons. And this adds a dimension to being Catholic and being a person of faith and putting into action. And quite frankly, in a local way, we really can't do that. But your letter supports Pope Francis as much as anything I've seen this year. In his sometimes the lonely nights of prayer that he has to spend when so many people either are opposed to him or they just sort of ignore him. I look at him as the #1 political spokesman in the world for peace. And now I can look on your letter as the #1 new initiative in this country to ban nuclear weapons. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you very much, Ed. I appreciate that very, very much. Thank you.
Okay, I don't want to ignore Sharon and David, if we could, and then we probably should close it off because we're beyond the time that we wanted to go. Unmute yourself, yeah.
Okay, I just really wanted to say thank you, Archbishop Wester, for your letter. I think it is spurring and inciting and excitement, and more people getting in tune with this obviously insistent topic. So many of you on the call probably have already done this, but if you haven't, I'm just going to suggest, David and I ordered 10 copies of the Pax Christi publication of John Wester, Archbishop Wester's letter, and we ordered 10 copies to give to the priests in our area and to give to our own local bishop, and then to other friends that might. There's not a lot of interest back here, but if we can spark a little interest, but I just think ordering the copies from Pax Christi, I'm so grateful. And then the San Diego Pax Christi, Pax Christi has given them the copies, and they're sending a copy to every Catholic member of the of Congress. So they've gotten the addresses, the names and addresses of all the Catholic members of Congress, and they're addressing the envelopes and covering the postage. But Pax Christi gave them I think it's 135 copies. But if you haven't ordered copies, I'm just saying, order copies. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today and for all of this. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you for joining us.
Loving God of life, who has made human beings in your image and likeness, and who built this wondrous world as a beautiful garden fit for human dwelling, whose creation was broken when we humans, spurred by pride, envy, and greed, rejected our humanity and pursued with violence the delusion of godhood, which has brought us after millennia to the brink of doom, as we, like the Gadarene swine, rush headlong to self-destruction, either by the slow burn of climate change or the fast flash of nuclear annihilation. Stay the hand of our madness, clear our minds, and give us the grace that we might embrace the fullness of our humanity by humbly tilling the earth and striving to repair the damage we have caused to this planet, to the other creatures with whom we share the planet, and with one another. In your loving mercy, send your spirit to hover over our world and to move across the face of the chaos we have loosed upon it. Guide us as we work to restore, however imperfectly, the paradise you intended to be our home. We ask this through your Son, our brother, our Savior, our Liberator, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mike. Once again, thank you so much on behalf of the Archbishop, Pax Christi, and the Association of Pittsburgh Priests. And let's continue to pray for each other. Let's support each other, and let's continue to advocate. We can make a difference.